everyone, my name is Jessica Ng. I have been a director for 10 years and it's been quite an adventure, and I'm here to share with you some of the procedures for certification or to get your permit. And so DOH actually requires 2 FDNY fire department examinations, and here I have for you the FO7, the fire drill and emergency conductor test, and then the other one is the S95, and that is actually the certificate of fitness for supervision of fire alarms. Now between the 2 tests, I would suggest for you to go over the FO7 first. This one is actually the test that's easier, and when you take this one, looking at the study materials, it will make a lot more sense afterwards for the S95. But to start, I do want to remind everybody that before you're allowed to go in to take the test, they're going to request for you to have an employer letter. And if you're self-employed, don't worry, that's fine too. You just need to have your company logo and make sure you have down the reasons why you need this certificate. And it can be that I am self-employed. There's actually a sample letter which we will also send out to you that the FDNY department actually drafted for us, and you can actually just use that, just change it into your name, change the logo, but the most important thing is to make sure you get that notarized. Now for notary, if you decided to get it done and you forgot to bring it or anything like that, you're gonna have to go back and find a place. There's UPS, there's Western Union, there's a couple printing companies in that area to take a printout and go notarize. Let me see, what else? Now to find this FDNY site, it's actually pretty complicated to find. So when you put in the Google address, they'll send it to you. They'll send you to 9 Metrotech, but they'll send you to the front door. Where you need to be at is not the front door, but actually the back door, and that is actually in the handbook. You'll see it here. And how I would suggest for you to take it is to go early. Why do you want to go early? Because after you finish waiting and you take your test, you find out that, oh no, you missed it by two questions or so, or 3 questions or so. Guess what? You can also go back outside, repay for the $25 fee, and take it again. Or if you're ambitious, you can also take the S95 and FO7 together on the same day. Then that will save you a trip to the FDNY site again. And so to cover some of the basics, you do need to know what is the procedures of the fire drill. In the handbook, they'll tell you a couple of things, such as the emergency preparedness plan. Now this is something that you have to know the definition for. This question is definitely going to be on the test, and you're going to be expected to identify, yes, the questions are multiple choice, but at the same time, you do need to be watchful of how they're wording their definitions of the characters in here. So I actually circled 2. There's one for the emergency preparedness vocabulary, and the other one is for fire drill. You do need to know the differences between the 2. And then moving in. I've also highlighted on page 15 the public address system and the 2-way voice communication. These are also important for you to know how the differences are for the 2 and which ones do you use at which situation basically. And then I've also highlighted for you over here fire and emergency drill conductor responsibilities. This part is where I mentioned that you do need to know what are the procedures, who should be doing what, people need to be assigned to certain jobs, and who participates in these type of fire drills. And one of the major vocabularies that they also use was fire and emergency preparedness, FEP, staff training, over here in the back. You will have to know the difference between this FEP versus the drill conductor. This is actually one of the trickiest parts that I found in the test. And so basically a fire drill conductor conducts the fire drill, and the FEP people, the FEP staff, they are the people who are involved, such as teachers, the adults, even in restaurants, clients and salesperson, or whoever the workers are. Everybody else that's in the fire drill, they are called the FEP. And then I have for you also highlighted training methods. Training method is also important. I believe on the test there's about 3 questions that cover this, and you have to know which form of testing is allowed and which form of testing is not allowed. So I would definitely look over to see what are the differences between a live presentation training versus a video presentation, which ones qualify and which ones don't. Over here in this section, they cover exactly what you need to know on the test. I've also highlighted this FEP training. Now, this you don't need to memorize because they do give you a reference sheet, and the reference sheets will have this. They have about, I remember being 3 or 4 questions that cover this section, this chart. You don't have to memorize it, you just need to know how to be able to read it. For example, if they're talking about group occupancy that are using the location is group A, you need to be able to tell what are they telling you in this column, what are they telling you in the table. It says refresher training for FEP staffs. What does that mean? That means every year you are expected to retrain your staffs on the fire drill emergency training. And in this case, for Group A, they are expected to train for 1 hour quarterly. What does that mean? Quarterly means that every 4 months, they need to have 1 hour of training. So in 1 year, 4, 8, 12, they should have 3 hours of training. So you don't need to memorize the table, just know what it's asking for and what you're looking at when you're referencing back into this. Let me see. On page 19, I've also highlighted for you the fire alarm system. Over here. And in this part, you need to know the type of languages actually. That's actually one of the questions that are on there, and what type of languages are appropriate. And obviously, if majority of your staffs are Mandarin speakers or Russian speakers, or they speak Spanish, you need to have your instructions in that language. Obviously, if they don't understand English and you're telling them English instructions, they wouldn't know what to do. So having your languages in having your preparedness, emergency preparedness in multiple languages is definitely recommended and beneficial. So I think that's pretty common sense type of response that you can take a look at. And then also, one of the things that I've actually written down that's not on the handbook, not in this book, not in the manual, is that you need to know the differences between the vocabulary. Oh, this is backwards, but it's shall versus should. Now, the differences between the two. Shall is something that it's mandatory. You have to use. It's going to ask you, the FDNY imposes the word shall. This means, and they'll give you ABC, multiple choices. Remember, shall is mandatory and it's mandated to follow these rules. Versus should. Should is a vocabulary that's as is. It's for you to recommend to your staffs, and it's the fire department is recommending you to follow. It's not a requirement, but it's something that they're telling you so that you can decide if you want to execute or use or not. And then moving on, I would like for you guys to look at page 24. Actually, this part is guaranteed on the test. So what happens when the fire alarm goes off and the firefighters actually break into the building and come into your facility to see what's going on, but you found out it was a false alarm? You didn't realize that the oven was smoking up. And so it rang the alarm and it went through to the fire department and they sent people over. So usually in that type of situation, they're going to send you a fine. So in this part, it says, the building owner will be subjected to violations and possible fines for unnecessary and unwarranted alarms. And in this situation, it's considered as unwarranted alarms, sorry. And then this part, 4.5, that says participation in drills. Actually, this is one of the parts that you do need to know. What are the basic procedures? How do you conduct a fire alarm or fire drill system? And then what happens afterwards? It is said that FEDCs should also seek participant feedback to identify issues and the need to make changes in the implementation of the emergency preparedness plan. Yes, you do need to go back after you completed your fire drill. You do need to step back and think about, what was it that I need to fix in my drill to make the situation more smooth, so the next time when I'm taking my kids out, how can I make it smooth? For example, if it's winter and you forget all the coats, what should we do to make the coat transition faster? Maybe have one of the teachers grab all their coats and go outside with the children as they're going out, and then they can put on their coats outside. Or you can have them like immediately grab their coats and then have the children immediately grab their coats and line up. So these are things like, alterations that you need to make. So basically what this part is saying is that you need to have feedback. You need to be able to go back and think about, how can I improve what I just did? And actually asking staffs too would be a really great help. So this is called post-drill feedback. And then one of the other things that I want to mention is that on page 25, there's a list of instructions for you to follow through. And these are actually pretty common sense. If you completed a fire drill for any schools before, you'll know that these are the steps that you need to follow. And this is gonna be actually part of the question, part of the content that they'll ask you for. And then on page 26, I've highlighted a section. It says, if a building occupant refuses to participate in a fire drill, ... This is actually exactly on the test. So they'll give you multiple choices of couple of answers, but the answer is on the book. You can see the FEDC should inform the building owner that that person did not participate. So my answer for this would be to complete the fire drill, continue the fire drill, and then after you finish the fire drill, go back and talk to the owner so the building owner can do something about that. And then the next sentence actually brings back, after discussing the drill with the staff and building occupants, the FEDC should thank everyone for participating and answer any drill related questions. Now this is also a feedback. Coming back into the question before, it's a feedback. It throws back to the conductor, to going back into asking the participants, asking the public what was good, what was bad. If they had any questions, they can answer them. And then I've highlighted table 4.2 on page 26, same page, a reference table. Now this reference table, just like the table before, you don't need to memorize it. It's going to be provided. All you need to do is make sure you know how to read it. What is it saying? For example, Group B, college and universities. It says in accordance with New York State education law. What does that mean? You don't know what that means. Of course you don't. That's because you didn't read it yet. So make sure you go back into page 53 and that is actually the education law. Just familiarize yourself with it. You don't need to memorize or anything. Just have the general idea of what it means. And then they do cover several parts of this. Look, Group B, college, office, and office. There's 3 different types of offices. So you need to make sure which type they're covering and the drilled frequency in accordance to it. For example, if a building has offices, it's a Group B, it has offices, and it has a university. How often does the building itself need to complete fire drills? Well, you would have to go over there to over here in colleges and university. It says it's according to the New York State education law, and actually in the page with the education law, it tells you that within the first 8 months, I believe, you have to complete 8. Let me see. Yes. You have to complete 12 of them, and 8 of which are required between September 1st and December 1st of each year. And then you go back and you see that for the group offices, it needs to be completed quarterly for the first 2 years, after the issuance of the certificate of occupancy, and semi-annually after that. Now, which one do you use then? Obviously, you would use the one that requires more frequency. So the requirement for the building would be the one that requires more fire drills. You don't go according to a lesser one, but you go according to one that's more. And then there's a couple that also does that. There's one for Group I, I1, Group I, I2, and then there's reference notes that you do need to look into to see which one applies to which. There's one particular question that tells you that if the building or if the business is actually only just operated within the first year, it says note C, of an I1 building or occupancy, drills shall be conducted monthly. So then this one would override what's written here, bi-monthly. So instead, if it's a new company, it needs to be done monthly instead of bi-monthly. So this question is definitely on the test as well. And then on page 29, I've also highlighted another section, and it's called the fire and emergency drill conductors in educational occupancies should be aware that most fires in schools occur between the hours of 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. That is very obvious because that's when most of the children are in school and most of the people are in school. So we have to make sure that you remember 8 to 5, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. That's when people are working. So one of the other questions that was also mentioned in the test that was provided was if something is blocking or construction is happening in one of the exit routes, what should the fire conductors do? The fire conductor should actually look for an alternative plan and inform relative people of that situation. So let's say if exit C is blocked off, so you're going to go in to tell all the staffs and everybody related that instead of using exit C, we're going to use exit A, so that they know if an emergency happens, they go exit A because exit C is blocked. I mean, you can read over everything else, but that part, it's gonna be there. So now on page 31, it talks to you about mixed occupancy buildings. That was where I was mentioning to you earlier on the table, where you have a couple of different user groups in the building, which fire drill log do you continue with, which one is for the building itself. Remember, it's the one with the maximum numbers of fire drill requirements. And it says drill frequency is a function of requirements of each occupancy, even if the occupancy has a combined emergency preparedness plan. And then I highlighted the example that you should read and know of, because this is very similar to the question that's going to be on the test as well. And now I've also highlighted on page 32, communications between the fire drill conductor versus everybody else that's in there. All the staffs, everybody else, how will they know? Now, such communications may take place by telephone, other than a telephone requiring a coin to operate. I highlight that part, and I think I would underline that part too. And text message, email, walkie-talkie, or other approved means. Now, the question that they'll ask you is, which one is not an approved method? And it says over there, other than a telephone requiring a coin to operate. So you have the answer for that right there. And then record keeping is actually also part of the book too, also part of the test too. So you do want to look at how you're supposed to record your logs. That is also going to be associated with the S95. So even if you're not taking a look at it for this one, for the F07, you do need to know it for the S95. So a lot of the two contents are correlated.